You're doing it again right now. Even as you read this, part of your brain is already preparing explanations. Explanations for why you clicked this video. Explanations for what you're doing with your time. Explanations for choices you haven't even made yet. You live in a mental courtroom where you're simultaneously the defendant, the lawyer, and somehow still losing every case. You think you're being reasonable when you explain yourself. You think you're being mature, considerate, even intelligent. But here's what you're actually doing. You're training everyone around you to see you as someone who needs permission to exist. You're broadcasting weakness with every justification. You're literally handing people the rope they'll use to hang you with later. Picture this. You decide to leave a party early, a completely valid choice that needs no justification. But what do? You launch into a whole speech about being tired, having an early morning, not feeling well, needing to feed your cat. You pile excuse on top of excuse like you're building a defensive wall. And everyone's standing there thinking, why are they trying so hard to convince me? You turned a simple goodbye into a confession of guilt. You do this everywhere. Someone questions your food choice, and suddenly you're explaining your entire digestive history. Someone asks about your weekend plans, and you justify why you're staying home like you're committing a crime. Someone disagrees with your opinion, and you write a dissertation defending thoughts that needed no defense. You've become a walking apology for your own existence. Here's what's really happening in your brain. Every time you over-explain, you activate the same neural pathways associated with lying. Your body literally treats excessive explanation as deception, flooding you with stress hormones, making you sweat, making your voice pitch higher. You're chemically programming yourself to feel guilty for existing. Think about that. You're poisoning yourself with explanations nobody asked for. You know who never explains themselves? People with actual power. Watch them carefully. They make decisions and let them stand. They state preferences without justification. They leave without speeches. They say no without stories. And everyone just accepts it. Why? Because confidence doesn't require consent. But you've created this bizarre reality where every choice needs a committee approval. You text paragraph after paragraph explaining why you can't make it to something. You rehearse conversations in the shower, preparing defenses for attacks that haven't happened yet. You lie awake at night replaying interactions, thinking of better explanations you should have given. You're exhausting yourself fighting battles that exist only in your head. And the worst part? People smell this desperation on you. They sense that you need their approval, and it repulses them. Not because they're cruel, but because neediness is fundamentally unattractive. When you explain yourself constantly, you're basically wearing a sign that says, I don't believe in my own choices, please validate me. And nobody respects someone who doesn't respect themselves. You've probably noticed that the more you explain, the less people believe you. It's like a cosmic joke. You provide 10 reasons for something, and they trust you less than if you'd given none. That's because truth doesn't need elaborate defenses. Truth just is. But you've forgotten this fundamental law of human psychology. Here's a truth that'll sting. You explain yourself because you're terrified of being disliked. You think if you just provide enough reasons, enough context, enough justification, everyone will understand and approve. But you're chasing an impossible dream. No amount of explanation will make everyone happy, and the attempt is killing your authenticity. You've become addicted to explanation like a drug. You get a little hit of relief when someone seems to accept your reasons. But like any addiction, you need more and more to get the same effect. What started as occasional clarification has become compulsive justification. You can't make a single move without preparing your defense. This addiction started young. Maybe you had parents who demanded explanations for everything. Maybe you learned that the only way to avoid punishment was to have a good story. Maybe you discovered that explanations could manipulate outcomes in your favor. But what worked as survival in childhood is destroying you as an adult. Think about the last time you said no to someone. Did you just say no? Of course not. You probably gave them your entire calendar, your financial situation, your mental health, status, and 3 alternative solutions. You turned a 2-letter word into a 20-minute presentation. And for what? They were going to accept or reject your no, regardless of your performance. It's like Carl Jung observed about the shadow self. We project our own insecurities onto others and then defend against their imagined judgments. You're not really explaining yourself to other people. You're explaining yourself to the critical voice in your own head, the one that says you're not good enough, that your choices are wrong, that you need permission to be human. The comment section probably has people right now typing out long explanations for why they disagree with this. They're literally proving the point while trying to disprove it. They can't just disagree. They need to justify their disagreement with paragraphs of explanation. It's almost poetic in its self-defeating nature. You've trained people to expect explanations from you. Now, when you don't provide them, they get uncomfortable. They've grown accustomed to you serving up your reasoning on a platter, and when the platter doesn't come, they feel entitled to demand it. You've created monsters who feed on your need for approval. Subscribe only if you're ready to stop defending your right to exist. Because that's what this really is. A defense of your basic right to make choices without committee approval. You're still doing it. Right now, some of you are mentally preparing explanations for why you're still watching. This, I'm just curious, you tell yourself. I'm learning something useful. Stop. That internal monologue where you justify your every move. That's the prison you've built bar by bar, explanation by explanation. Let's talk about what's really happening. In your psychology, when you compulsively explain yourself, you've developed what psychologists call an external locus of control. You genuinely believe your worth comes from outside validation rather than internal conviction. You've outsourced your self-esteem to a committee of people who barely think about you. You know what's pathetic? You probably explain yourself more to strangers than to people who matter. The barista doesn't need to know why you're ordering decaf. The cashier doesn't care why you're returning that shirt. The random person at the gym doesn't need your workout philosophy. But there you are, word vomiting your life story to people who forget you exist the moment you leave. Here's the sick part. Every explanation you give creates a debt. Not a financial debt, but a psychological one. When you explain yourself, you're essentially saying, I owe you a reason for my existence. And once you establish that debt, people start collecting. They learn they can extract explanations from you like coins from a broken vending machine. You think you're being polite. You think you're being social. But what you're really doing is teaching people that your boundaries are negotiable. Every unnecessary explanation is a signal that says, if you push hard enough, I'll cave. And guess what? People push. Not because they're evil, but because you've literally trained them to. Watch what happens when you stop explaining yourself to someone who's used to your justifications. They get angry, they get confused, they might even get aggressive. That's not because you've done something wrong. It's because you've cut off their supply. You've stopped feeding the dynamic you created, and like any junkie cut off from their fix, they panic. You've probably noticed that the people who demand the most explanations from you give the least in return. They make decisions that affect you without consultation. They change plans without notice. They set boundaries without justification. Yet somehow, you're the one standing there with a PowerPoint presentation about why you need Tuesday afternoon off. Carl Jung talked about individuation, becoming who you truly are rather than who others expect you to be. But you're so busy explaining who you think others want you to be that you've forgotten who you actually are. You've become a walking performance of acceptability, constantly adjusting your explanations based on your audience. Here's something that'll hurt. Your explanations are actually lies, not conscious lies, but desperate attempts to make your truth palatable to others. You don't say, I don't want to come. You say, I'm not feeling well. You don't say, I don't like you. You say, I'm really busy lately. You've become so skilled at these soft lies that you've forgotten what your actual truth sounds like. You know who you over-explain to the most? Yourself. You have entire conversations in your head where you justify your choices to an imaginary jury. You explain why you deserve rest, why you deserve success, why you deserve basic human needs. You're prosecuting yourself for crimes you haven't committed. The real tragedy: while you're busy explaining yourself, life is happening without you. Opportunities pass while you're crafting the perfect justification. Relationships stagnate while you're preparing your defense. Dreams die while you're explaining why you can't pursue them yet. You're so focused on the explanation that you've forgotten about the execution. You've created this elaborate mental framework where every decision requires a cost-benefit analysis that you then need to present to the world. But here's what successful people understand. Most decisions don't matter enough to warrant explanation. The energy you spend justifying could be spent doing. Think about the last time someone confident made a decision around you. They just announced it, didn't they? I'm leaving now. I'm not interested. I've decided to do this. No committee, no explanation, no seeking permission. And what did you do? You accepted it, because confidence doesn't invite negotiation. But you've trained yourself to believe that every no needs a because. Every preference needs a rationale. Every boundary needs a dissertation. You've turned simple human autonomy into complex social negotiation. And it's exhausting everyone, especially you. What would happen if you just stopped? What if the next time someone asked why, you simply said, because I decided to? What if you treated your choices as final, rather than rough drafts awaiting approval? What if you acted like someone whose decisions matter? Here's what most people won't tell you. The majority of your explanations are preemptive strikes against judgments that were never coming. You explain yourself to avoid conflicts that existed only in your imagination. You're fighting ghosts, shadowboxing with criticism that nobody was actually thinking. The comment prompt for this section: what unnecessary explanation did you give today that you now realize was completely pointless? Think about it. You probably explained something in the last 24 hours that needed no justification whatsoever. You've become so accustomed to explaining yourself that silence feels wrong. When you don't immediately justify a decision, you feel guilty, anxious, almost panicked. That discomfort, that's your nervous system recalibrating to a new reality where you don't owe anyone an explanation for your existence. It's exactly like Carl Jung observed about the persona, the mask we wear for social acceptance. Your explanations are just elaborate mask maintenance, constantly adjusting the image to ensure everyone finds it acceptable. But beneath all those explanations, who are you really? Do you even remember?